It's buffering.
Monali,
Yeah,
Kavita
it's
madam
live
is
now.
joined.
Yeah.
Kavita madam is joined, yeah.
So,
Madam, good evening.
good evening to everyone.
Good evening, Dhiren. Good evening.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, madam. Good
So
evening.
we are live now.
Okay.
So shall I start?
No, Monali, just wait for 5-10 minutes because people are joining. Right, some people they are joining. Please okay, wait. Just 5 minutes.
If the HOD is joined, then I think we can start.
Join.
But then he has network issues.
What does
Maybe,
HOG stand for?
Head of the department.
HOD, head of the department. Okay. Yeah. I knew it was important, but I didn't know what it was.
Listen, I'm joining. Some people don't join. No, you're not telling me join.
Sorry.
Maybe we can start the session now. Otherwise, we may get late for the second speaker. Good evening to all on the last day of the international webinar of Indian languages. This is the third day and the last day. Today we have with us two speakers, very prominent speakers, Professor Shobhana Chelia and Professor Kavita Rastogi. Our first speaker will be Professor Shobhana Chelia, and let me give a brief introduction of her. Shobhana Chelia, ma'am, is Distinguished Professor of Linguistics and Associate Dean of Research and Advancement at the College of Information, University of North Texas. Her research focuses on the documentation of the Tibeto-Burman languages of Northeast India. She was a program director for the U.S. National Science Foundation's Documenting Endangered Languages program from 2012 to 15. She's currently partnering with individuals and academic institutions in India to create a state-of-the-art archive for the long-term preservation and access of language documentation materials. This archive, the computational resource of South Asian languages, is housed at the University of North Texas Digital Library. Chelia's 2021 Fulbright Nehru Chair Fellowship is dedicated to development of these partnerships. Her publications significantly include A Grammar of Meitei, which was published by Moten in 1997, and the Handbook of Descriptive Linguistic Fieldwork from Springer in 2011, as well as articles on Tibeto-Burman differential case marking and language context, and many of which she has co-authored with her students. She's working with political scientist James Mirnick and Kimi King to create interdisciplinary frameworks to understand threats to language vitality. With health information expert Sarah Champlain and phonologist Kelly Bergson, she's working to bring culturally framed COVID information to underserved populations in the United States. With computational linguist Alexis Palmer, she's working on discovering different marking patterns through cross-language comparison. These three projects are funded by the National Science Foundation. I now request our speaker, Shobhana ma'am, to kindly deliver her talk on describing reduplication. Thank you. And the session is declared open.
Thank you so much, Namalin. Thank you for your invitation. I'm very happy.
Shobhana ma'am, you can.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right.
Yes,
great.
yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for your invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I wanted to also add a little bit to what you said, which thank you for that nice reading of my bio. I also have a new publication out. It's called why language documentation matters. It's a very short book, about 100 pages. And there should be already a PDF of it circulating somewhere in India. If you're interested in looking at it, just let me know, and I can share some details with you about how to get a copy of it. So let me share my screen and I'll pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, I have a rather simple and I hope to the point discussion today, and it has to do with how to make something like collecting information on reduplication even more interesting than what we are doing so far. It seems like a lot of our work that we do on reduplication and we present in our grammars and our writings are usually like lists, right? Lists of different reduplicated forms, and we show like if it's partial or full reduplication. But we don't often go deeper than creating those lists. And the question is, if we look at the theoretical work on phonology in the last, especially through the 90s, but even sometimes through the 2000s, many of those things that have to do with optimality theory kind of came with the study of reduplication. But the reason why people were able to do those theoretical works is because they really described this phenomena of language in ways that are deeper than what we're currently doing. And so I wanted to just show some of the ways that we looked at reduplication for the Lamkang language and see if those are of interest to you. I know many of you have done things like this. I see Dr. Pautang Haukip is in the group here. I know he has written on this issue as well. But when I was working on this paper with my students, we noticed that there wasn't really as much as we could have based on, so many languages in the region. We only found maybe 4 or 5 where we could find really deeper or more varied kind of description of this feature of language, which is so common, right? In all of the Northeast Indian languages, we have a lot of reduplication. We use it all the time. So there should have been more, but we didn't find a lot. So today I want to talk about some different types of Lamkang reduplication. I've listed 6 of these here: reduplication of noun phrase constituents, idiophones, stative verbs, and very interestingly, verb roots themselves with or without inflection, and adverbials, clause level adverbs. We probably won't get to those 2, but those are also features that can be reduplicated. And the thing that I want to really focus on while you're looking at these are three different things. One I've not listed here, but this is a common thing that you and I have seen many times, is the description of the semantics. What is the meaning that's imported by these reduplicated forms? That we have done a lot very well. And Dr. Abi's book on reduplication in the languages of South Asia has, lists of different features that you can look at and so on. But in addition to that, what I'd like to think about is the interplay of affixation and reduplication. How are these ordered? How are these interleaved? And what kind of rule governing is needed to describe these based on the different forms that we see? And then secondly, what is the kind of stretching of the phonetics and phonology that happens with this kind of more affective use of reduplication, right? So, or this more affective morphology. A lot of morphology is stuff that you absolutely need, like the inflectional morphology, and stuff that you use to add more content, like modification, adverbial modification, that is derivational morphology. This particular type of derivational morphology, if you think of reduplication as falling in that group, has such strong emotion attached to it that also seems to be reflected in the stretching out of the phonetic possibilities of the language. And this new kind of way of looking at sound systems through the lens of affective use of language, you'll see people talking a lot more about these days in terms of like, what can we learn from verbal art about how phonetics and phonology work in a language. So that's where I'm going with that. And so here's some information about the background about this particular presentation. The collection of the data for this took many, many years, and it took many different people. It involved, first of all, the collection of connected texts. So we didn't do just word. We did some word collection, definitely, but we really started with the text collection. And these texts were collected through like recordings by speakers themselves, Daniel Tolong, Rex Kular, Sumshot Kular, myself. And we then had those translated and transcribed and translated, again, with the help of speakers themselves, such as Sumshot Kular, but also Rex Kular and Daniel were involved in that. And then the creation of a Flex project by my graduate assistant, Tyler Utt. And then after that, after we had finished all of that text collection, then we used that as a basis of talking to speakers again and saying, we've seen these kinds of reduplication patterns. Can we find others that are similar or in the same vein? So for that, we had many different speakers involved, and I've listed some of them. I think most of them that we worked with here in point number 3. And we're very grateful to them for their insight. And I have to say that just talking to somebody first about a list of words, you get a certain list, but it kind of ends very soon. It dries out, because think for yourself, if you wanted to list what are the reduplicated forms in my language, you would get so far and then it would just sort of, your imagination would kind of run dry there. You need a lot of pragmatics background information to get more. These folks, when they're doing their introspection, when it's coming from their introspection based off of the text, it seemed like they could do a lot more and give a lot more information. Excuse me. And then after all of that was done, some of my students here at UNT, Melissa Robinson and Evelyn Blair, for example, used PROT to look at some features of those reduplicated forms. Specifically, they were looking at vowel length, and hopefully in the future, we will also be looking at tone and the differences between vowel length in the reduplicated forms and in regular Lamkang speech, non-reduplicated speech, as well as tone differences. And then all of these things are now available on the Corsal archive. So under the Lamkang collection. So this is sort of the background, and then I've also acknowledged my funders, the National Science Foundation and some University of North Texas funding, which allowed me to bring students to India, and we were able to then work with speakers in Lamkang land. Many of you know about the Lamkang language. It has an ethnologue code, it has an ISO code, a Glotto code, and it's from the South Central branch. And it has, so it's got these very closely related languages, Aimol, Anal, Mangsan, Chote, Kom, spoken in proximity. And what would be really interesting to do is to have a cross-language kind of database of some of these reduplicated forms to see how each language kind of has its own take or has similarities in the way that these are put together. And I haven't found that yet. I would love to work with somebody if they're interested in doing that. So now let's dig into the different forms of reduplication in these languages. So the first thing is just this kind of nominal modification, of which you are very familiar. You have a head noun, and then this adjectival piece can be copied either totally or partially, and then it may or may not be followed by other modifications. So the first thing that we did after we collected very many different types of reduplication is that we tried to form these little kind of structural descriptions of them. And once we started doing that, we could see that there was a lot of difference. Before we boxed ourselves in to these structural descriptions, before we used those to guide our understanding, we couldn't see it very well that there were so many different types, but pinning down that structural information was helpful. Okay, so the way that we're looking at these really is to divide up in, the first thing was that structure, right? But to further then say each of these will have a function, it's going to have some sort of semantic import, the meaning of it. And then we can look at that function, that form that I've just mentioned. So the function, they're going to be modifying. In this case, in this particular case, they're modifying the head ends of these noun phrases. And then the different kinds of meaning that you get. So in this case, for this particular structure, what we're getting is an encoding of the sensory perception of an activity or entity. So I'm watching something. How can I then encode the feeling that I get when I am perceiving that entity? So it could be a sound or a sight and so on. And by encoding this in this way, using this feature, then I'm able to make that for you, the listener, be kind of viscerally or vividly felt, as opposed to if I just used the adjective itself. And because I'm trying to make you feel emotionally involved with me, I do a lot of phonetic kind of finagling. I lengthen the vowel, I lengthen the tone. I may use the same vowel in the reduplicated forms. I may use a different vowel, kind of ablaut pattern. But all the time, it's the fact that I want you to really feel that emotion with me that is making, like kind of pushing the way that I package that reduplicated form. So that's why when we look at it, we see that the vowels are played with a lot. And also though, there does seem to be some correspondence where the lighter the intensity or the emotion, then where we see spread vowels being used like E, CC, DD, and so on. But when the emotion is heavier, when it has to do with larger entities, we find open vowels, ah, and so on. Non-spread, non-rounded vowels. Okay, you're familiar with these examples. I'm going to go through them pretty fast because they're quite simple to look at. But you can see that we have the word for big here is an actual word, but the pa form may or may not be related to this kind of Tibeto-Burman augmentative that Matisoff has written about. So there's a really big stone, okay? Lungklin papa kaampi. So you have that papa, usually the first or the second is lengthened, and we want to keep that in mind. Here's the one that is not with the ah sound, but the e sound. So this is a very little tiny bird. So now sisi. And then also this, which is not really talking about a large or a small item, but trying to say that the cracks in the ground, that the soil feels like it is this crackly kind of thing. So sip, sipa, right? And also then here now it's completely metaphorical. It has nothing to do with the physical ID, but that I am remembering something and I'm feeling very nostalgic. And here again, you can say rong ronga. Okay. And this one shows us this kind of ablaut pattern of dik duk. The ground is uneven. All right, so what we noticed was that the pitch and the vowel length of the first and second element for these particular structures, where you have an N head noun and then a modifying unit, they're not identical. In some cases, the first form of the reduplicated thing is lengthened and heightened. In some cases, it's the second one. And what is interesting is that, what was interesting to us is that we know that vowel length in Lamkang is phonemically significant. And so we can measure those vowel lengths for the short vowels and the long vowels, like tren, train, those are distinct, lim, lim. And we see that the vowel length of these forms and the reduplicated forms are significantly longer than the vowels that are phonemically long, and opposed to the short vowels there. And so we found that to be an interesting kind of stretching, one example of how the standard description needs to be expanded to say you have vowels that are short and long, and then you have these vowels that are super long because of this reduplicated forms. In addition to that, these super long vowels are very interesting because in the long-short distinction that you have in Lamkang, there's also a distinction in vowel quality. So you can, the short vowel, for example, tren versus train. So these peripheral vowels are tense, the ones that are within are laxer. So you see that difference for long short that are phonemic, but for these super long ones, you don't see that quality difference. So they're very special phonetically. And this was discovered because we started really making lists of these and studying them. All right. Let us continue to some of these other examples where the reduplicated form can actually stand in for the NP. So this one, for example, he's saying, choose the big ones, choose the big bags. In this case, you just have klin a. So the big, instead of saying bor, which is the word for basket, bor klin a, we just say klin a in this case. So these forms start to kind of stand in for NPs, as we know that adjectives can. So those things that we have looked at so far are about reduplicated forms, which are similar to ones that we would find perhaps in a word list. But something that we could not find in a word list are these ones that have some affixation on them. And there are different ways in which we see that affixation. In some cases, that affixation is on the entire copied form. So in this case, you have keng, and you then have makeng. So this is from a pair story, right? All the pairs float out together. Well, now as linguists, we stop and say, how was this form derived? How is keng creating makeng? How do we get this form from it? Because the ma has scope over that entire form, we're thinking that first the copy is made and then we get the affixation happening. Let me expand my window to make sure that, is my volume, everything coming out okay? You guys? Yep. Okay, good. So continuing then, let me go to this form, same sort of idea. Let's take a look at this form, which is quite a bit longer. It's a full clause. We eat mostly boiled vegetables, isn't it? So that is the vegetable. This is the boiled part, kacham, and you'll see a nominalizer and then the verb simple, the stative verb that then becomes sort of a gerundive form. So something being like simple vegetables, that is what we mostly eat. All right, so now taking a look at this complicated verb here, let's break it down to its pieces, because what we find here is right inside of this verb, we don't find just one verb root that has prefixation, suffixation, inflection, and derivation. What we find is that it is the reduplicated form that is getting all of this modification on it. So in this case, we have the stem 2 of the verb eat copied. So chak, the chak in that rang. So whatever our theory of grammar is, it's going to have to take into consideration the fact that you start with our building blocks are this form eat, stem 2 variant. We copy that. Then after the copy happens, then we start doing our affixation of putting on our inclusive for the we, right? We eat mostly boiled vegetables, and the in for the plural marker, and then our aspectual markers. So this kind of complexity in morphology is something that we don't find written about very much in the theoretical literature, and I think this would be a very interesting type of grammatical information to move from description into our theory. So a lot of times in the way we talk, we say, well, I do theory or I do description, and you can't really make theoretical models more interesting unless you have this kind of interesting data. And so to get this interesting data, we have to collect connected sentence, a full sentence with some pragmatic information, because this particular verb, I could not have gotten it by just asking for a list of idiophones or reduplicated forms. I had to go through the whole process of creating that Flex project and then finding it. Now I can go back and ask people, what other verbs can I do this with? But before I wouldn't have known, and they wouldn't have also, because these are very low in the perception of native speakers, they can tell you about a lot of other things, but these are sort of ingrained in the grammar. So this is something that I had to not discover, but uncover, by doing a lot of that hard work of doing the flex work that was done. All right. Another example of the same thing, makuku. These mostly have distributed readings when you have this prefix M and then the copied forms. Same sort of idea here, natum in. So in this case, it's slightly different because remember in the previous one, we had ma and then VV. In this case, we have NV, NV. So this is slightly different. In this case, our reduplication machine, so to speak, is going to start with that tum, and it's going to prefix the N on it, and you have the natum. Then that goes to the next step of being copied as a whole, natum in. So if we wanted a grammar of reduplication for this language, it would have to take into consideration the different ways in which the rules of copying or reduplication are interspersing or interweaving with the rules of prefixation. Okay, abor in each of your baskets. We find that abor must have been formed first, and then we find the copy, and then the in is put together. Each of your bamboo ties, and so on. All right, let's go on to another type. In this case, what we have is a verb onto which we put a nominalizer. And so from the verb, then we get this ing form. So walking, that we know about. But if we have something like read, then we get being read, right? And then we put a copied modifier on it with the vowel, the consonants being the same. So C, V, the onset is the same and the coda is the same. The vowel may be different. There may be a different vowel pattern. So this ablaut pattern or identical verbs, vowels, we don't know. So here are some examples of that. So here we're talking about water. It's dripping off of like from a faucet or from clothes that are on a clothesline and they're dripping down, right? So the chai, then tik tika. So you have a full copy of the tik, and then you have this kind of topicalizer and this almost, there's no verbs on here except for this nominalized chai. This is a very, very common construction that is used in conversation. With this reduplicated form telling you something about how this dripping is happening. So the rain is drizzling. Sarsar. How water is boiling. Right. So for this list, once we found one or two of them, well, let's say we found 10 of them, then we could go to our speakers and say, okay, so if water is dripping from a piece of cloth like this, then what about if it's, just something is drenched and it's just going in much more force, or if it's pouring from a waterfall, how is that different from water dripping from a faucet, and so on. So it was a great kind of, once we got a few of them, we could then extend the pragmatics and try to get more of them that way. And then speakers were able to build that image in their heads and produce more examples. All right. Let's see if I can go down further. The moon is shining brightly. So dang dang. So again, we have the nominalized light, and then you get this. So somebody is crying. So we've moved from a stative verb now into more active verbs, but still with this nominalized form. Okay, just to distinguish these two, the previous one, this is a baby that is katrap hul hula with the hul part. And then this is the rong from feeling sad, also crying, but with a slightly different affect. Being very ripe, which is perception of some sort of, it's not something that you can quantify, but it's trying to get across this from the yim, from the spread vowel here. Tiny bit of ripeness. I love this one. This is great. Your breath is smelly. Nam susua. Okay, and we go on with that kind of K verb and then the modifying reduplicated form. As I've moved through them, you've seen that we've changed from being CV, where the V's are the same, to CV, where the V's are different. So now we have ding dong, we have trek trok, bam pum. So one thing that we wanted to find out is, where do you get pen pon and where would you just get pon pon or pen pen? Is there a difference in that? I wonder what you think. How do you think one gets that information? As you, as a speaker of a language that has a lot of reduplication, how do you think you would try to figure out that distinction? It was not easy because it's very hard for speakers to think of this in isolation without really having a kind of story behind it. But Rex Kuller that we worked with did help us put together quite a large collection. He is still working on these, and he's making a much longer list, which he will finally, publish in some form. But we have, through our Flex project and through working with him, put together a pretty long list and of these already. Not as long as his is like 400 or so. Ours is probably more like 100 or 150. But it helped us make these different categories. So there's a distributed use, okay? There's an intensity use. So if you're thinking very hard about something, or something is flowing with great force and so on. More intensity, breathing heavily, size of something, or intensity of something being beaten up, as you see here. Lots of different types of this. So now, okay, manner. Something is happening gradually, it's moving, it's fluttering, and so on. So the manner of something happening. Take a look at these. Completing an action, something being completely beaten up or something being completely fulled, then you can use kang arkang. Okay. Something still iterative or something still happening, progressing, like wiggling around, kol kol. So what I'm trying to say is that by doing this, we also see that the manner adverbials have implications for aspect. And if you're studying aspect, if you're studying tense, then you have to either extract or take into consideration how these adverbials are contributing to the aspectual reading of a clause. And you can read about the aspectual readings of a clause in Anvita Abi's book, or in Pautang Haokip's description of reduplication in Kuki Tada, but we are just saying that we need to recognize that, and we certainly see it in Lamkang that there are aspectual meanings there. All right, more manner. And so this is like the manner of something else, and then I equate it to the manner of what you're doing. So this thing that you're doing, like rustling paper, is like the sound of crickets. This thing that you're doing is like this other thing. So these are some of those examples. Okay, more manner. Here's duration, right? So doing something continuously. Again, this is the aspectual reading. Tunten, as in repeated piercing, iterative, and so on. This has to do with size. This you're familiar with, I'm sure. But what was interesting to me, because it's different from Meitei, I believe, Meiteiron in Lamkang, which is true for other South Central languages, the size of the actor is what is reflected in this reduplication, not the size of the action itself, or a combination of the two, but the size of the actor is very important. So I believe I have two sentences about waddling here, which we will get to. One is the waddling of a baby, and the other one is a waddling of a person. And you use a different type of reduplicant for the same verb, which is to waddle, walking in a funny way. But depending on the size of the person who's actually doing it, a different reduplication pattern will occur. Okay. Let us move through these. And I'm now coming, I think, to some of the last examples that I have before I conclude my talk with my concluding kind of remarks for it. So first we saw the nominalized verb and then reduplicated modifier of that, and then the a form. In this particular form, what we see is nominalized verb, and then the a form. So really we get a noun or noun phrase, and then we get ing, some verb ing, and then topic marker or copula. So for example, they say the horse has a long tail, right? So these existential, stative, gnomic kinds of expressions are expressed in this way. Reduplicated form, and then this copula. So long is basically is what that form would be like. And then the baby from Paidam is beautiful. So you get katra, katra, So Paidam tungba now. So that's the baby from Paidam is, so beautiful is. Similarly here, but you notice in this one, this is the rice you brought with you to the field is very tasty. You don't find any copula here, and that often happens with these forms. You just have kadi and no copula. So it looks like it's a verbless clause. Again, something that you will be familiar with in your investigations of the languages you're interested in. But we can fit this into kind of a formula of construction types, because we know that there are those that have kadi copula, and then this fits in exactly the same semantics, the same form. It's just that the copula deleted here. All right, same thing here. You have kapundam, but no kapundam e or kapundam p. No copula, but it's the same idea. And so on. All right, so that was that. Now let's look at the I think this is the final one. This is the reduplicated root. And then the root here is being copied without, like the previous one we saw was K root. And here it's root. So let's look at that. I love this verb. It's the verb to kiss. Doesn't it sound like that? Put. So put tidao. So you're copying the entire form, and then on top of that copied VV form, you're putting all of the affixation. Usually this has a distributed reading. But here, let's see, crying a lot. So here you continue to write. So his eyes became so puffy because he was just crying a lot. And you can actually, when you do this, you can copy this many times. Tra. So you keep crying. So it was cried. Here's another one. They shot at it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times you copied this. Makan. They kept shooting. You can't do that with the other reduplicated forms, but when you have the V's, you can do that. Okay. Here, the copy is not just of the root, it's of the entire verb. So arvantiin. So you have arvanti, which has the directionals involved. It has, so it has the actual verb in it. And then on the end of that whole form, you put the in, which tells you it's a non-singular form. All right. Same sort of idea here. And then let us then go on to some of the final things that we felt were worth really investigating further. This is something we still are looking at, which is the fact that in some of these forms, the affixation is not happening on the edges of the construction, but within the construction. So we had one where we had like prefix root. So there we said, okay, prefixation happened first, and then we put the form together. This particular form, trek, artrek, lamtida, the artrek must have been formed previously, then it is combined with this trek. So artrun, trek, artrek, lamtida, how was the sequence here of this being created? So we have to have affixation first and then reduplication. But writing the rule for reduplication of this is going to be difficult because we have to say that it's not an exact copy. It's not a copy with ablaut. It is a copy of the root with this piece already on it. And so what are the rules that allow for that? And what are the rules that restrict that? We don't have that kind of directed investigation yet. What we've done now with our documentation and description is set up the field so that my next set of students or one of you could go out and then do this very targeted investigation. That's why this documentation is important, is because we're able to set up the field for the next level. And the way we're able to do that is to do a really deep documentation of it. So this form could not have been discovered except that we had it in a story. Okay. I keep saying that same thing over and over again because this is so important, right? If we want our documentation to feed into theoretical description, we have to do better, more deeper documentation. That's why I keep saying it. All right. So this sek is that one that I was talking about, the baby waddling in Arvang sek sekta, and I think if it's a larger person, it's got an awe on it for the waddling in. We looked at Hakalai, Tadao, and we looked at Humi, where we did find some examples, and we found the following thing when we compared them. This is what I was telling you about, that it's a tall person, then you have tun, tlun, tlun. That's the way that he's running, but it's really talking about the person who's doing the running, not just the kind of running that's happening. Okay. If it's a fat person running, then you get lum luma. But if it's a thinner person running, you get tlum tlum. Okay. I'm going to skip over that. Okay, so we compared against these three languages. And what we wanted to see is how many of them have, what are the similarities and differences between the languages? And what was interesting is that for partial reduplication, all three languages did have kind of ablaut patterning, like the Dok Dek kind of example. And for whether that first consonant, so sek, the consonants are the same in the onsets, right, of the reduplicants. For Tadao and Lamkang, they always seem to be the same, but Bauteng can tell us if I'm right about that or not. But it seemed like in this paper anyway, for the languages, they were the same. But in Lai, it seemed like the first consonant could also be different. So I would be curious to know for your languages, can the first consonants be different? Then for the vowel length difference, either it was not marked, which I am thinking that it probably wasn't marked, but it looked like in Lai and Tadao, the vowel length for V1 and V2 were not so different that the authors felt they needed to say something about it, or they will say something about it later on when they do more description. But in Lamkang, it was very, very clear that you could, very rarely were the vowels the same. They were either longer in the first reduplicant or the second reduplicant. So that was an interesting difference between those. And what we did then is we did go in and we measured the vowels in the first and second instances. And our initial discovery was that when we had like a distributed reading, it was, I believe, different, whether it was the first or second one that was longer, whether it was distributive versus a different kind of modification like adjectival, like intensity or something like that. So that was something that we can further look at, like, is it the first reduplicant or second reduplicant that's longer? And if so, is it correspond to a meaning difference or not? But what we did know was the difference between the first and second is quite drastic, and much more so than just a long and short vowel for the regular language. So you can see here with di puluplupa, the water sound made by boiling water, 42.2 milliseconds for the first vowel, but 156.3 for the second. Klin bet, 84, 112, and so on. Tik tik. Right. So when we use the orthography, it's very convenient, but it misses this important fact about the length difference. And so that might be something we want to think about, is adding IPA whenever the length difference is this huge. And so we did a number of these instrumental studies, and so you can see the differences here. Look at this one, F, sursura. So 91.3 versus 211.9, so 120 millisecond difference between the two. And I mean, we can go down a rabbit hole with this. Like, is it the extent of intensity that tells you the difference? We don't know. This is something that we could definitely try to look at. Okay. So to finish up then, what I've done so in this quick presentation on reduplication in Lamkang is I've given you a way in which we try to be more kind of systematic in looking at form, meaning, and then how those forms may be challenging, stretching, or leading to the next level of investigation for these languages in a more theoretical way, and looking also to see if we can have some cross-language comparisons to do that same thing, which is because then it would be really interesting if Monsang and Anal do things differently from Lamkang. How come? And what were the influences that caused those? And where are those edges where they can be different? Where are those places where they are going to be similar? And so that is where I will end with. I will also say that if you're interested in this topic, in the grammar of Manipuri that I had written, that was one of the chapters, had a whole bunch of things about the reduplication, and there also you see several different patterns that are available. So this was my presentation for this morning. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobhana ma'am, for your wonderful talk on reduplication. And there are so many patterns and so many varied features that we could see. And I was so amazed with so many data from so many languages. And I was, in a way, comparing with Dimasa and Lamkang adjectives are quite similar in the pattern with Dimasa. So I got so interested when I was looking into the Lamkang adjectives. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions coming from the participants. So you can either text your questions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can raise hands also if you want to take turns. So the session is open for discussion.
Say hi. I say hi to some familiar faces. Moisel, hello, how are you? Good to see you. Always in this. Pautang is here. Good to see you.
Haokip, do you have any question? Pautang Haokip.
Okay, let me come in and break the ice. It seems everybody is silent. Okay, thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful presentation. I don't have much question. What kind of tone sits there in the reduplicated elements? So are the tone the same or different? So we have this between the reduplicants. What are the tones that do they have the same kind of pitch, or one of them is slightly lower, or is that only what do you call intonational, or what is it? What do you observe? What I observe for Thadao is that more or less the tone between the two reduplicated elements are the same.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I would say that the longer vowel definitely has higher pitch, and it's not within the range. Just like the vowel length is not in the range of the long vowels, the pitch is also not in the range of what we would see for high pitch. It seems much higher, and it depends on, as you know, I mean, there's nothing new for all of you, but the more the intensity, the higher the pitch, seems like. Would you not say that for Thadao? Like if something is far away.
In terms of length, yeah, we have to really examine the length, but more or less based on perception, based on my perception, the two reduplicated elements have more or less the same length. But perhaps there could be other examples where length variation may be there, but that has to be looked in separately. I have no time to look at it, but mostly what I've looked at it are of examples where length is more or less the same, and they have the same kind of tone. That was my first question. And the other question is slightly general. Regarding these, what you call reduplicated elements, Kuki-Chin languages tend to exhibit. So all languages have reduplicated elements for verbs, for adjectives, so verb, verb, noun, noun, adjective, adjective, or noun plus verb, and so on. But what we have for Kuki-Chin languages is that we have this verb reduplication, or we call it what you call it idiophone, and some people call it chiming, and which what you call David Peterson. David Peterson told me he would love to use something like verbal classifiers. So though the reduplicated elements are there, but the nature of reduplication is different between Kuki-Chin languages and other. In the case of Kuki-Chin, we have mainly sort of what you call verbal classifier if you use Dev's description. So can you throw some light on the differences between this sort of reduplication we find in Kuki-Chin languages and which may or may not be available for other subgroups?
Yeah, I think it's useful for, like, as David Peterson says, like to make that distinction, because this you don't find, for example, in Meiteran, where you have the size, or the size of the, for example, so the size of the noun that's being modified being reflected in that reduplicated form. Mostly what we find in Meiteran is you're modifying directly the verb and the verb action of the verb. So as this subclass or the sub-use, then that terminology for the South Central or Kuki-Chin languages seems very useful to call those a kind of classifier for the verb. So I see that that's how he uses that. It becomes, I think because we would like to encourage like cross-language comparison from all the languages, whether they're Kuki-Chin or whether they're other, then it might be useful for us to kind of get together and decide. We have all these different types of reduplication. This is what we want to call it. Like, for example, as you were saying, some people use the term idiophone. Some people use the term onomatopoeia, and they don't really say what they mean by it, or if they're distinguishing it, and we all use them differently. Or some people just say reduplication. They don't. So I think that rather than saying I haven't answered your question, I can see that there is a problem here in terms of our not having the same agreed upon terminology. It would be very useful to do that. And I don't have a very strong feeling of which way it needs to go. I'm willing to agree with the majority rule on that. So, because I don't feel that it makes a huge difference really, what we call it. We just have to make sure that those things are the same, as long as we're calling the same thing, right?
Thank you, Dr. Pautang Haokip, for that question. That's very intriguing, because even in my class, sometimes I have to, tell my students different terms we use for the same thing, and it's quite confusing also. Onomatopoeia, expressive education, idiophones, equal words, very much, coming in hand together. So
yeah, so if we could,
there.
Right.
I think Bijen,
Yeah. Thank you, Monali, and thank you, Madam, for that detailed presentation. This is just how to say, not a direct question. What that intrigued me after listening to you about the phonetic features over this reduplication. What I felt about Meiteran is in the percent reduplication, we can establish something like that you have shown us. This is not in the normal space, but in the situation like if I'm interrogating someone, then something like tawi togde or something like tai tade. So there, I think the vowel length event as well as some other phonetic features, they are not similar, which we use in the normal space. That is what I have observed after listening to you, ma'am. That is one of the observations that I would like to give here.
That's excellent. I'm very happy you said that, and I would hope that we could then expand the kinds of speech that we look at. Like we're always looking at, oh, let's collect a story or something, but why don't we do like everyday speech? Because as you just said, Bijayan, when you think about like if you're scolding somebody or if you're praising someone, everyday speech, suddenly something new, a new feature arises. So that would be great to learn more about the structure through these other genres of talking.
Yeah, but in other reduplicated, I don't think so. This is not the case. I have gone through the chapters of reduplication that you have mentioned in Meitei grammar also. But in Norman, like or the full reduplication or the complete reduplication, I think this is not the case that we can able to point out in the percent reduplication that I have pointed when we interrogate someone, or it may be a different situation also that the same case can be established. Yeah, thank you for giving time, Monali.
Thank you,
Monali,
Bijayan. That's
can I?
yes, Dhiren sir. Yes, please.
Thank you, Suvarna ma'am, for your wonderful talk. Just I want to know that reduplication of personal pronouns and WH words are very common in Tibetan languages, but I haven't seen any kind of personal pronouns or the W words in your examples. And what do you think that the same language is having the same kind of features or not? Please.
Yeah, they definitely occur. I just had not included them because they didn't seem to, add a little bit to those main points I was trying to make. But you can say, which villages should I go to? So there you get, the WW kind of, as you were saying, the question words. Yeah, which all people should I give the food to? So then you get WH there. I'm not remembering the pronouns. Like there must be, but I have not seen that yet. Like I guess you would say like again distributive, right? Like I want to give it to you and you. Maybe that in that case I'd have you copied to give to all the people here. But I'm making that up. I have not seen that example yet. I don't recall that example yet. But definitely for the WH words, they exist. So it's a gap of omission, not of that it doesn't exist. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, in your example, I did not find example for something like color reduplicants, something to do with very bright, something to do with very black or blue or kind of thing. So are they also quite rampant in your data, ma'am?
Yeah, for some, much more common seems to be these things like dengdang, which say, so you put the word for white. So you put like K white. So the K would be the nominalizer. So being white. And then after that, you get some description of that. So it's very bright or it's but not the opposite. Like it's very dull. You don't get that, but you get very bright. Shiny.
So what we get in Thado is we have something like contrastive, something that is having a good side and also having the bad side. So we have both a reduplication for bright and also dull. So that contrary reduplications are commonly found in Thado. I have given few examples from my data also. So you are saying that you have only for something like white, but not contrary to something like there is dull or something.
Yeah, but you have to accept that Pathang, that I am not a speaker, so I'm only using my very limited knowledge. So it is very possible. So I will look at your paper again and see if I can find that. That would be surprised.
No,
I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
But what would be so cool is if all of us could get together and just like make a big database and just do the comparisons across. We could learn, like just like now, like what you're telling me, that I'm like, oh, I should have looked at that. So just if we can, we would, I think, benefit from that. I would benefit anyway. Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like if you have, how do you reduplicate something that is very thin, like as in your hair kind of thing? So do you have some?
Yeah. That's there, but you're talking about actually copying the noun, right?
No,
Where
I'm
you're
talking about the adjective thin.
the adjective. That definitely is there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, full reduplication, if you're cutting something into small pieces, then you'll say sek a. If you're cutting it into larger pieces, there's a different one that you use for that. But that's not on the noun,
No,
right?
something
That's
like
the
if you have
verb.
something like as thin as a thread or as thin as your hair. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at that list to see if there's something like that.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
Musil, Khaling, Uncle Musil has a question because he
Oh,
has
good.
been in the video for quite some time.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for giving the opportunity. I was intently listening from the middle part of the presentation, but then I was attracted to the example number 11, where Madam has translated as mostly.
I'm trying to find it. Keep talking.
Yes, I have
Oh,
also.
yeah, I see. Yeah. Let me.
I have also
continue.
of presenting a paper on these reduplicative things. But then whenever I make the analysis of this reduplication, it is an borderless ocean. I find that it is unending. So
Did you say unending?
Unending means there is no border or there is no ending of this reduplicative thing. Anything can be reduplicated. But then the mostly thing is also a new thing to me. That was very attractive to me. Sometimes highly and slowly and fastly and truthfully, like this. There are so many things like that in reduplication. But in this mostly thing, today I noticed that in the presentation, mostly thing is a new thing to me. That is what I wanted to convey.
Oh, that's a great observation. Yeah.
And in terms of this long sound, say in Uyghur language, kaina means anciently. Then kaina, that means anciently, like that. Like that. We do that in those things there. And this, when I was analyzing on this, the mostly thing did not come to my mind. So today you have opened my eye that mostly thing is one thing. So that is what I wanted to convey, that in your presentation, the mostly thing is also exists in reduplicative meanings. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Just two responses. One, I think the Anvita Abhi talks about this kind of approximate or almost doing something that is done with the reduplication. And so, as you were saying, mostly we think often reduplication has to do with doing something extensively or doing it a lot. but this was like approaching it or almost doing it or kind of doing it. Then I thought that was interesting when you were saying Taina. In Meiteran, often would be Taina, Taina mamangida, and you were saying Taina. You were stressing the root, not Taina. So this is that's why I think comparative would be really interesting also.
Yes, in Meitei it is Taina.
Yeah.
I think Uncle was saying kaina. Na?
Oh, he was saying Kaina. Oh, I thought he was saying Kaina. He's Kaina. Okay.
And in Manipuri, in Meitei, it is Taina.
Mhm.
And
But
if-
also, but it is the adverb that is the adverbial that is really lengthened, I think. Or maybe both can be lengthened. I don't know. Maybe both can. Yeah. What is really interesting is what cannot be done. So I wish we could get more negative data, and that speakers could somehow tell us like, oh no, that sounds awful. I can't lengthen that one. And then we can then come up with some rules that are interesting. So how can we do that? That's what we need to figure out. How do we get that negative data? Yeah.
Thank you, Uncle Musil, for your observation. I think Heminlal Haukip was trying to come in between. Maybe you can ask question now. You can unmute yourself. Heminlal Haukip. Okay, maybe he has some issues with the network. Are there
Okay,
any more?
meantime, Monali, yeah. My video was paused a while when Dhiren sir asked about the something about pronouns. Now, whether it was non-availability of pronoun reduplication, or I was just curious to know, sir.
Oh, were you asking me to repeat my answer, or were you asking Dr. Dhiren to?
Yeah, I was not able to hear the Professor Dhiren's question. What was exactly? So because my internet was fluctuated at that time.
Yeah. Okay.
Vision, reduplication of personal pronouns
Okay,
is
sir.
found in most of the Tibetan languages. Say in Manipuri, you know, nangi nangi thabak tau, right? Nangi nangi nathau tau. So the personal pronouns, you know, this nangi nangi is reduplicated, right? So I'm just asking to Madam, okay, why do you have such, you know, kind of primitives, okay, in the Namkang or not?
Oh,
This is
okay,
one
okay.
answer. Yeah, then you know, then second one is reduplication of WH words. Kana kana lai. In Manipuri, you see kana kana lai, right? The same thing, okay, happen or not? That is the questions. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, are there any more questions?
But if Madam can also add something on, I have not seen on taste. So different kind of taste like bitter, sweet,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of thing. So these are also abundant, perhaps in my area.
Good.
Thank you, Dr. Pauthang Haukip, for your suggestion, and thank you, Shobhana ma'am, for your very informative talk on describing reduplication to make it even more interesting. And we had a very interactive discussion on this. Thank you once again. We would now like to move on to our next speaker, Professor Kavita Rastogi ma'am. Before she begins her talk, I'd like to give a brief introduction of our speaker. Professor Kavita Rastogi has published extensively in the areas of structural linguistics, general linguistics, contrastive linguistics, and language documentation and revitalization. She has prepared a dictionary of the technical terms of linguistics in Hindi language. She has 7 books to her credit. Her 42 research papers are published in LTBA, Nepalese Linguistics, Indian Linguistics, Indian Journal of Dravidian Linguistics, and an Indian Journal of Applied Linguistics, Aligarh Journal of Linguistics, a Journal of Literature and Language, Gaveshna, Bhasha, Anuvad, etc. She has supervised 14 PhDs and has examined MPhil and PhD theses from various universities. She has successfully completed 5 major research projects awarded by UGC, ICSSR, FEL UK, CEL Lucknow, SJF Karnataka. She has been invited to give keynotes and lectures in various universities and in refresher courses. She is life member of many societies and has been awarded 6th HP Bhargav Memorial Professional Involvement Award in 1999. She had been a member of editorial board of the journal Indian Journal of Languages and Literature, Nagpur, and Aligarh Journal of Linguistics. She was also a member of the executive committee of LSI, which is Linguistic Society of India. Presently, she is she's nominated as a member of Board Studies for Linguistics by the Vice Chancellor of NEHU Shillong. She has also been appointed as expert consultant member of Center for Endangered Languages, Tezpur University. She has started an NGO, Society for Endangered and Lesser Known Languages, and works for the protection and preservation of marginalized and weaker languages. Kavita ma'am will be talking on linguistic acculturation, a case study of Rajiv. So I'd like to request our speaker, Professor Kavita ma'am, to kindly deliver her talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monali, for such a detailed introduction. Have you made me co-host? I would like to share my screen, Monali.
Yes, ma'am. You are your co-host.
Okay.
You can share your screen.
Okay. And thank you very much, Dr. Dhiren, for your kind invitation. And this is the first time that I'm going to talk about my passion, and I'm working for the revitalization of Raji language among the students and colleagues of Silchar University. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Today I'm going to talk about linguistic acculturation. Are you able to see my screen?
Can you please make it full screen?
Monali?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Are
Yes,
you able? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please make it full screen, ma'am. Full screen.
Oh, full screen. Okay.
There's a button here, just next to the minus button. This minus plus below. Just next to it, there is a button. Ma'am, or you can press F5.
F5?
Or slideshow, ma'am. There's a button slideshow on top. You can press there. Slideshow, ma'am. In the button slideshow on top.
On top?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's a button.
Slideshow and from beginning.
I have clicked the slideshow, but
this one, yes, this one, full screen, ma'am, below, just
this?
near minus. No, to the right, just near minus sign, next to minus.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. This one?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Just you want this, Manali, or you come now? Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am, you can start.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about linguistic acculturation. So first, let me just give you my views on acculturation. The term acculturation has been used by many anthropologists and sociologists especially. And in the reference, the term is reused in the reference that when two cultures come into contact, both the cultures affect each other. Quite often, one society absorbs the cultural pattern of the other society. And this cultural intermixing or interaction is called acculturation. Different anthropologists and different scholars have tried to define this term also. I have just given the definition, which is Webster, from the Webster Dictionary. Cultural modification of an individual, group, or people by adapting or borrowing traits from another culture. Also, a merging of cultures is called, due to prolonged contact, is called acculturation. If we try to see the linguistic landscape of India, you will find that this kind of acculturation is it happens all the time with us, because whenever we are in contact with southern states, because India had so many cultures are there, so many varieties are there. So due to television or media exposure, time to time, different cultures of Indian society learn things or borrow things from other. I have a very interesting example is coming to my mind regarding the acculturation issue. I am from northern India, and there's a fast called Karwa Chauth in my society. But today, the way the modern daughter-in-laws are keeping this, or are they observe fast, is quite different from the way we used to do this. We used to observe this fast. Lots of Punjabi cultural activities and customs have been these modern day daughter-in-laws are influenced by I think by television and by media, and they have added so many different rituals in their fast, in their Karwa Chauth fast. So, but in my presentation, I am going to talk about linguistic acculturation. One more important point that I would like to draw your attention is that it is not always, acculturation doesn't happen always when both the one community is dominant and the other is weaker or marginalized. As I mentioned earlier, that Karwa Chauth, the activity of Karwa Chauth has influenced from the Punjabi culture and has come in our northern culture. So both the cultures are well-developed culture, both the cultures are affluent culture, but the Punjabi culture has affected us. So it can happen between two dominant cultures also, but it creates problem. When one culture is at the higher pedestal, is followed by, has large number of speakers, and the other is a marginalized culture. An American linguist, Schumann, has tried to develop an acculturation model. And according to him, one has to thoroughly adapt the culture of the L2 to learn it properly. So he says, learners will acquire the target language to the degree they acculturate to the target group. So if you want to, according to him, if someone wants to learn a second language, he has to acculturate him or herself. So you have to go deep inside that culture, then only you will be able to learn the second language. His acculturation model was criticized by many scholars later on, but I'm not going to talk about that because we all know that we learn second language, and many of us are are bilingual, and many of us are trilingual, and without being acculturated in that particular culture, we have learned those languages. So the term linguistic acculturation is not used by many scholars. And way back in 2004 and 5, I read this term, and these are my views. We all know that borrowing is a very productive process. And since many years, I'm working with a tribal community, and not only in tribal communities or marginalized community, I can talk about Hindi community also. Time to time, we have been borrowing terms and words from different languages. In Hindi, we have borrowed many terms from Dravidian languages, many words from from Munda languages, and from Arabic, Perso-Arabic words are there, and so many words from English language, and so many words from English that a variety of English has developed, called Hinglish. So and other dominant languages are constantly borrowing from other languages. But in my view, when this type of borrowing is done by any marginalized group or by some endangered language, and the borrowing is, they do not borrow terms for new concepts or for the concepts which are not in their culture. What they do, they try to replace the existing native terms. These type of situations create a very complex situation for marginalized or lesser known languages. So when due to intermingling of cultures, the linguistic elements slide in the structure of an endangered language, and due to psychosocial pressures from the dominant language, gradually their original native linguistic elements and features fade away. I call this process as linguistic acculturation. And with the help of Raji case study, I'm going to talk about the phenomena. I'm trying to describe and clarify the phenomena of linguistic acculturation with you. So a very brief introduction about the tribe, because once you will learn the socio-economic and communicative pattern of this community, then you will be able to understand the situation and the current scenario in which this tribe resides, and in which under those social pressures in which this community lives. The name of the community is Raji, which is quite decent and it looks very nice. But in earlier government records, in earlier writings of the scholars, I have read the name Banraji, which is also not very offending term, meaning Ban means forest, and Raji in Sanskrit is called for the line. So, so people who live in jungles can be called Banraji. But look at the third term, Banmanus. Banmanus is a Hindi term. The meaning of Banmanus is chimpanzee. So this was the most common term used by the other dominant culture speakers and other societies residing along with the Banrajis in the earlier time. Banraute Rajbar is the currently used term. According to the census of 2011, you are seeing that their head count was very small. In 2019, my society, with the help of a team, my society did their census collection, and only 899 Raji speakers were there. And or you can say are there, because I don't think that numbers have increased much. All the community lives below the poverty line in 12 geographically scattered hamlets, In each hamlet, there are either 12 to 20 Raji families. They live there. In the state of Uttarakhand, in 2 districts, Pithoragarh and Champawat. The important point is that they live inside the jungles. In the hospital, the terrain is very inhospitable, and they are quite far from the dominant community. So they have to travel sometimes to 5 to 6 kilometers to go to either a school or hospital or nearby villages, nearby markets, and to do any work. They have to travel a lot. Just to give you a brief idea about their previous living conditions and the present situation, I have made a table here. Raji was one of the last hunter-gatherer nomadic tribe of Asia. So it could be we can state that from India, this was the one of the last hunter-gatherer tribe of India. So, but presently they are compelled to lead sedentary life, which they do not like at all. Since last 75 years, they are living a sedentary life. They are living in small hamlets, which government has provided them. The government built houses for them, but they still do not like it. In 2001, in 1998, I visited for the first time. I met them for the first time. But in 2001, while I was interacting with Raji children, they were residing in a residential school. Actually, a government, a leader named Hira Singh Bora. He's no more right now. He was a social worker. With the help of government aid, he built a residential school for Rajis also. That was a very good initiative. But the condition of the school, the attitude of the teachers, and the attitude of the class 4 employees that I observed during my visit was not very good. They were not very, the conditions were not very congenial for Raji children. Though they were getting lots of food, they were getting dresses, but they were not comfortable. They wanted to, they didn't want to stay there. So their hunting, fishing, and jungle and collection of jungle produce were their occupation in the olden days. Nowadays, they also prefer to hunt, but they are not able to because they have been prohibited by the government. And in earlier times, they used to make wooden bowls also, and their wood making craft was very very good and very popular among their neighbors also. But right now, only 1 or 2 male Raji speaker, Raji person is able to make those bowls. Availability of wood is not there due to forest laws, and condition of this tribe is getting worse day by day. So government has created lots of schemes, but like in other areas, the implementation part is very poor. Presently, most of them are worked as daily wage laborers. Few of them are involved in crude cultivation, wood cutting. Some of them, they do wood cutting also. In earlier times, they used to hunt and eat langur hunting, porcupine hunting, and catching bat was very favorite activity for them, but they rarely do these activities right now. So right now they eat local food. In 1998, I noticed at that time also most of the children used to have two names. One was from their community, and the other from the other word was from Hindi. But right now, actually, I have been working with Raji children, so now all the Raji children have Hindi names only. Polyandry was very popular among the group in olden days, but presently all of them, they practice monogamy. Um, Within the clan, marriage was popular in the olden days and in recent times also. But in 2019, I noticed that now a few of them married. They have already married outside their whole community, and they have a special term for those people. An interesting part is that three Raji girls, they married other community male members, and the whole community called them Desi, and their children are also called Desi. So they are not called Rajis or Rautes or Rajbar, which is a very popular new term used by them. So custom of bride pies, but now they are following all the regular Kumauni and Hindi customs. Mm, Women has not very important position in earlier times, but presently women is the pivot or key factor around which all the Raji social structure revolves, because presently due to the influence and bad influence of neighboring community, most of the Raji male members have developed the habit of drinking. So they are not involved in day-to-day activities. Very few of them work in some of the daily. They work as daily wage laborer, or in they work. They are occupied in some work. Most of them are involved in drinking. All the ladies are working. They are looking after their house, and they are looking after their children. So all the whole society depends on them. So after telling you the cultural aspect of the society, let me talk about in totality, the ethnic status of the community. Thus, the social contact with the other groups has brought some structural and material changes in their lifestyles. There is ample evidence to show that due to spatial contact, the Raji society has not only borrowed some of the ways of living and eating practices of the neighboring people, but has also acquired some of their customs, as I mentioned there. It seems clear, though they have not completely abandoned their tribal past, yet gradual adoption of the Hindu way of living may be considered as an indication of the working of the process of Sanskritization. So let me talk about the language. So this is the genetic aspect of the Raji language. The name of the language is also Raji, which is an ethnonym, which is very common phenomena with most of the tribes. The name of the tribe and the name of the language is same. But I would like to mention here that in their own language, they use a word called Batkao. So Batkao is a term for language. They do not have any word or any name for their language. Earlier, people used to call their language Jungli. Gerson has also mentioned this word for their language. So in 1998 till 2004 and 6, many of them used to tell me that the name of their language is Jungli. So first thing, when we conducted workshop with Raji children, we did. So we asked them to remember the name of their language, because many of them told me that they like the name Raji. Earlier, actually, there was one more term, Rauti. So in my earlier papers, in few papers, I mentioned this term, but Rauti, the word Rauti and Raute create a sort of confusion among the scholars. So I revert back, and I'm also using the term Raji, and I taught the children after talking to their parents that the name of their, whenever someone asks you what is the name of your language, don't use the word jungli, because in Hindi jungli is a very degrading connotation. Though in earlier times this word was used for the people or for the things that belong to jungle, forest, but later on with semantic change, the word is used in a different connotation. So when the neighboring people call them jungli, or you are a jungli person, your language is a jungli, this creates, this humiliates them. So, we did this type of effort with them. Many people think that this language belongs to Munda family. Actually, so many borrowed terms and so many borrowed grammatical features are there, so many layers are there. So still it is very difficult for me to draw any conclusion. I'm still trying to establish, but whatever data presently I have, I think maybe in olden times, this language this language belongs to Tibeto-Burman family. And this was seconded by Professor Drim also, and Professor Yadav also from Nepal, because a very contiguous tribe, Raji Raute tribe, lives across the border area in Nepal also, and their number is also they are quite big in numbers. And in my opinion, actually in earlier times, Raji groups residing in India initially migrated from Nepal. Maybe in 100 or 150 years back, because for the first time in 1923, one British scholar mentioned for the first time in 1823, he mentioned regarding this tribe. So before that, maybe just by wandering, as they were hunter-gatherer and wanderers, and there was no no barrier in the border area, so they might have just migrated or wandered from Nepal. But the second migration happened recently in 1987, when they migrated from Pithoragarh to Champavat district. This is important because the Pithoragarh district is a highly mountainous region, and Champavat is a Tarai area. So the flora and fauna of both the hamlets which lie in Champavat area, and the flora and fauna and medicinal plants of their original habitat are quite different. So we are working on that direction also, on that area. So let me talk about the, I will skip this, just the domain-wise distribution of the language. So now let's come to the linguistic acculturation. So after collecting the data while I was trying to analyze and describing this language, because my objective was to prepare grammar of that language, I found that the data I collected in 1998, and when time to time when I visited the community in 2004, and the data I collected in 2006, the shift was very quick. The language was shifting very quickly, and the changes were occurring very quickly. And in my initial data, I found only 1 or 2 words with retroflex sounds, but later on, I have found many words and they were replacing the sound. As initially they used to call lado for stomach, but later on, all the speakers, I collected data and I heard and noticed they were uttering the word, they were pronouncing the word as lado, and jaro was the earlier pronunciation, then jado. So retroflex sounds were there. Nasalization was very common in earlier data, and it was phonemic also actually in few vowels also. I found examples phonemic yeah, at the level of phoneme, it was creating distinctive, it was working as a distinctive feature when the nasalization was used with our sound, our vowel, but they were very but the use of nasalization was very common, irrespective of their proximity of nasal consonant. They used to utter at phonetic level, they used to use nasalization. But in later data, many speakers lost this feature. And the interesting feature was, one of the interesting characteristic that I noticed, that in 1998, many Raji women who used to live in the faraway Raji hamlets, the presence of glottalization was there. Though I didn't find any phonemic, it was not creating meaningful difference, but glottalization was at phonetic level. They were quite happy to pronounce those words with glottalized sounds. But later on, gradually, those women lost the glottalization effect. They no longer use those words with glottalization. So, and the most worrying point which I noticed, that many words from their day-to-day living, which I have found earlier in their data, they were there. They have replaced those terms. Dukaiya is a term for father's younger brother, and now all the Raji children, all the Raji community speakers, all of them. Some children are not aware of the term Dukaiya only. And you will be surprised to know that in 2019, while organizing a workshop with Raji children and their mother, when I uttered a word, while showing a picture of an earthworm, Garfulya, no one was aware of this word. All of them were speaking the Hindi term. And not only nouns, they are replacing the verb terms also. So this phenomena was observed from the initial data collection. Initially, actually, Raji has a very flexible word order. I noticed in the earlier times, but now all of them use the word order used by Hindi or Kumaoni speakers. Subject, in earlier data, many Raji speakers used to omit the subject, and Abang Ja was a very common constituent order, or sometimes Ja Abang Kalavati was used by some speakers. But nowadays, Kalavati Abang Ja is a popular constituent order used by all the speakers. I'm not talking about when I am eliciting data. I'm talking about I have also collected conversations, and in those conversations also I have noticed that right now they use different constituent order. They have borrowed genitive marker of Hindi and Kumaoni, and a very interesting point. They have one plural marker la, and they have two terms, jhik and jamma. And they have, in earlier data, I noticed they have special praise for jhik and they have fixed place for jamma. Jhik for they use the jhik for inanimate nouns and jamma for animate nouns or pronouns. But now they use these words interchangeably, and due to the influence of Hindi, a very interesting phrase they are using nowadays. Nani is a pronoun which itself is a plural, but now they are using nani jamma. Like in Hindi, they use hum sab. So they have started using this phrase also. Shobhana ji was when mentioning and telling her, presenting her work regarding the reduplication. Many points were coming to my mind, and thank you, Shobhana ji, because now I will again look into this aspect while I will actually presently I'm trying to work in the genetic affiliation of this language. So as I heard in your talk that most of the Tibeto-Burman language they have very rich reduplication, Some participants were also mentioning that this. So I will try to collect more data in this area. But right now, whatever reduplicated forms I have, they all are either from Hindi or from Kumaoni. They have developed a very new word class. In earlier data, the adverb, the function of adverb was done by a marker, which was added in front of the verb form. But now they use all these three words from Kumaoni. So a new word class has come up in this language. Hybrid tail head linkage. So they use a phrase I ke baad. So I is a Raji pronoun, K is a genitive marker in Hindi, and baad is a word for after in Hindi. So while telling me a story or narrating a story, I have noticed that after 2 or 3 sentences, like in Hindi, when we narrate a story, iske baad yeh hua. So most of the Raji female speaker used to tell me, and when they were just narrating me their day-to-day activities also, they were using this phrase time and again. So subjective conditional mood in these sentences also they frequently use Hindi agar and to, the connecting words we use in Hindi. So in the let me check the time. Sorry, Manali. It's 9. Do I have time, Monali? Can I continue or Monali?
Yes, ma'am, there's time. Yes, ma'am, there's
okay.
time.
Okay, thank you. Because now I would like to tell that after noticing these linguistic acculturation, noticing this linguistic acculturation phenomena, and these features which have been borrowed by this community, I tried to tease apart only one layer of this endangered language. On one side, at the lexical level, it has borrowed terms to fulfill current needs of the community. But point of concern is that it has replaced many existing lexical items during this process, as I mentioned in earlier slide. Similarly, the data clearly reflects that Raji is undergoing a grammatical shift and replacing as well as including some major areal features like constituent order, reduplication process, genitive case markers. All these things I have shared with you. So after collecting, analyzing, and describing the language data, when I noticed that the language is quickly shifting towards Kumaoni Hindi and falls between C, that is endangered, and D, nearly extinct groups established by WUM in 1998, and it can be called potentially endangered language, I started working in the area of cultural preservation and linguistic revitalization. So as I mentioned that my objective was to prepare grammar describing this language and preparing grammar. I do prepare the grammar, and Central Institute of India published that grammar, a descriptive grammar of Raji got published. But I wanted to preserve this language and help the community to revitalize their language. So I started working in that direction. So as the language has only oral form, so the first thing that came into my mind to create an orthography for the language. So with the help of the community, I created an orthography system. With the help of the most of my informants were female speakers, and with the help of children, I developed an orthography system and created this alphabet reader for Raji children. I went to Raji Residential School. This school was for Raji children only. The positive side of this school was that I noticed that after the class, as all the children were Raji, they used to speak and interact with each other in Raji language. When they were, while playing, while eating their food, while running around from here and there, they used to speak in Raji. I will tell you later on why I'm emphasizing this point. So I conducted workshop and taught them how to use language, motivated Raji children, requested the school teachers to use this book and at least take a class. But as there was no Raji teacher in the school, only one lady was there who was cooking food for Raji children, but she was not literate. So the whole activity which I did at that time went futile. So in 2017, we again visited the field and evaluated the program and created few more things with the community, with the help of the community, and tried to motivate them. This time we conducted workshops with women speakers. Actually, we noticed that a few Raji women wears a very nice choker kind of neck piece. So I asked them whether they can teach and where they can make this. So we conducted workshops, and FEL Society, the Foundation for Endangered Language from UK, they funded this project. So we tried to reteach and train students to use the script, Raji script, and simultaneously we conducted workshops for Raji women, and with the help of developed orthography, we created instruction manual, how to make this jewelry neck piece. Actually, meanwhile, I was collecting Raji vocabulary, and I was making talking dictionary with the help of Flex software. but I thought that actually the tribe is they are all, as I mentioned, that all the families live below the poverty line. So hardly 1 or 2% Raji speakers use phones, that too old phones. So I thought that making a tribal talking dictionary will not benefit the Raji community. So I prepared a published version of the dictionary. So this dictionary is a multilingual, multi-scriptal pictorial dictionary. All the terms I have given in Raji in their developed orthography in Hindi and in English, with lots of pictures. And the important thing is that I have given the usage of the words also. Actually, in 2019, since 1998, I was trying to record their stories. So, except for the story of their origin, I didn't get any story or any folk song from this group. So, in 2019, we conducted a workshop with Raji children and motivated them to create a story in their own language. We adapted 3 methods. There was some, we took out, we actually, they translated very simple class 1 stories. We told them some Hindi simple stories and asked them to create those stories, recreate those stories in their own language. Then, while playing with them, we asked them to create stories on their own. The activities they like to do, the games they play. So all these 5 books, storybooks, the original storybooks, all the pictures, drawings we have used in these books are created by Raji children. So only 15 days back, Society for Endangered and Lesser Known Language, the NGO I have founded in 6 years back, they published these stories, and now we want to distribute these storybooks among the Raji children. So, in the end, I would like to conclude by saying the whole idea behind these activities is to help the community in the preservation of their traditional art and to make them economically independent. We aim specifically at linguistic revitalization through community development. While Raji revitalization is the main goal, we are trying to achieve it via revitalization of the Raji people. Why I am saying the word we, I would like to clarify that initially all the work was done solely by me, but from 2017, a group of young scholars are with me, and all of us, we are doing this work. So Madhuri Kakoti is there, Dr. Vishnu Singh is there, Dr. Ajay is there, Dr. Satyendra Avasthi, all these young scholars. So the group is working in this direction. Most of the academia thinks if the community is not interested in the revival of their language and culture, for whatever reason may be, a linguist must leave them in their situation and should wait till the time the community is ready for revitalization program, or come forward and ask the researcher, language expert or linguist to help them. Why I'm raising this point, that time and again when I share my work with some Western scholars, they always tell me that you are working with the tribe, but the community is not interested. So you should leave them in their own condition. But being in the living in India, we know that these community. I think the condition of communities of Northeast is quite different from the community with which I am working, like Raji, or the other communities like Jad or Dharma I have worked with. Dharma is a quite affluent committee, but Jad is economically not that affluent and not very aware of their culture and language also. And Raji is the least aware community. And they are so involved and they are so busy in their day-to-day living. So one has to keep on motivating them to preserve their culture and to preserve their language. And the minus point with us is that we live quite far away from their community. I felt so helpless during the COVID period, because as soon as I got the information of this pandemic, so I was so worried about my people and about the people I have been working with. So I wanted to contact them. I wanted to tell them about this virus. And many of you know that that was the motivating with the help of many scholars, Cell made a COVID information flyer. So the motivation behind that was my interaction with the community, the feeling I have for my community. So, and that feeling was due to the love and affection the community informants give me when I visit them, when they cooperate me. But I know that when I'm not there, or when my group is not there, the situation is not in their hand, because they are so occupied in their daily problems. So that's why I raised this point. So we open that with constant effort and motivation, we can turn community passivity to active participation. And by doing so, we can curtail the acceleration of linguistic acculturation. So with these words, I would like to end my presentation, and thank you once again to the organizers and to all the audience.
Thank you, Kavita ma'am, for very interesting talk on linguistic acculturation, a case study of Raji. I was very overwhelmed with the kind of linguistic change that is happening in the Raji language. And when I went across some of the data that you have presented, for example, there was the sentence for the word order like Kalawati is eating mango, where the present tense is unmarked. And there was this verb ja, which means eat, which is also very much Bodo Garo. And then when Dream calls it a Magarik subgroup. And so it's so interrelated. I mean, even if Raji is in Uttarakhand, so distantly in the present context, but just like you have said, they have migrated from Nepal, and there must be some kind of lexical affinity with the central Himalayas and at least the Brahmaputra belt of the Bodo Garo group of the language Tibeto-Burman language family. Also, I saw this suffix ya in the nouns, like father's younger brother, where there was Dakaria, and there was this Aaron Smith where there was this ya, which is like a nominalizer, relativizer, which is also there in Dimasa and in Bodo Garo. So there can be some future study, some comparison before the language goes extinct, and it looks like it's going to be extinct very soon. So we, on behalf of Department of Linguistics and Tiblane, we totally appreciate Cell's work and your contribution in trying to document and revitalize the language as much as possible. So thank you, ma'am, once again. I am sure there will be questions from the participants also, so the room is open for discussion. You can unmute yourselves and ask questions, and you can also put the questions in the chat box.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, madam, for your wonderful talk. Madam, just I would like to know that, am I audible, Manali?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Manali?
I can hear you.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm audible. Okay. Madam, just I want to know that what about the attitude? What about the attitude of the speaker towards their mother tongue? That I want to know.
Uh, Actually, the attitude of the speaker depends on the attitude of the others. In the case of endangered and marginalized language, when all the others or the peer group around you, like the school teacher, like the shopkeepers, and like the doctors, they all always condemn you. You as a whole, your personality, your identity, and simultaneously about your language. So the person, it's very difficult to be confident about yourself, to have a good attitude about yourself, positive attitude about yourself. So I can give you an example about a dominant culture like Hindi speakers. English is a very dominant language in North India. I'm telling you about the North Indians, especially because there is a kind of inferiority complex in most of the North Indian students. So whenever they will see if someone is speaking in English, uh, uh, they try to speak in English, and they want to they think that they have a kind of superiority complex when they speak in English. So when a speaker of what is my point here is, when a speaker of Hindi community, which is a literally so rich language, is spoken by so many speakers. Uh, uh, all the speakers is use this language in different domains. They have this sort of attitude, the attitude of a mother tongue speaker of an endangered language. You can imagine when the other speakers are always humiliating them. So the attitude is not very positive. And the other negative point, what I have noticed is that earlier at home they used to speak in Raji, but recently last time I visited in 2019 only. I wanted to visit them in 2020 but couldn't. So in 2019 October, while conducting a workshop, many mothers complained me. Listen to it, Dr. Dhiren. They complained me, madam, do you know, now my son, he doesn't answer me in Raji. They don't want to speak in Raji now. At home also, the girls are speaking in Raji. And this kind of expression is used by many Raji children with us also. While we were conducting some workshops, and we were collecting data of medicinal plants, we wanted to conduct next workshop. Actually, they have a very rich medicinal plants in knowledge, traditional knowledge, but it's slipping so quickly, the younger generation is not aware. So we want to teach young generation the value of the traditional knowledge and the value of medicinal and the information regarding the medicinal plants. So when we were inquiring, all the boys, they told me, ma'am, go to the girls. They know Raji, we don't know Raji. We only speak in Hindi, and just to show off, while speaking Hindi Kumayuni, they use few English words while conversing with us, like ball, mobile, TV, all these common English words. The attitude among the speakers is also not very positive, Dr.
Yeah, madam. Actually, my opinion is that, in Northeast India there are many more endangered languages, but their parents, they encourage their children to speak the other language, that is other dominant language, but not by the children. But what you have told that, in Raji, their mothers, they're encouraging their children to speak the Raji, that is their mother tongue, but the children, okay, denied it. It's a very interesting factor. And what are the factors, okay, behind that? Okay, why the children are denying to speak the language, though their mothers, though their parents, they encourage them to speak the language, and it's one of the very important areas to explore.
Yeah, because they want to assimilate with the dominant culture. You could make out any Raji speaker by their appearance, by their posture, by the way they talk very easily. And there is a very negative feeling among the dominant community. So they want to be one of them. They want to assimilate with the dominant culture. So that's why. I hope I have. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you,
madam.
Dhiren sir. Yeah, thank you, Dhiren sir,
Yes.
for that.
I think
question.
Shobhana ji wants to. Any suggestions, Shobhana ji?
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to thank you for all your work that you're doing. It's so interesting. And I have not had the opportunity to visit these other communities, and I would love to come and, see and experience as well as the work you've been doing. So there's so many points that you've made about orthography creation and about the traditional arts and so on. So I'm wondering, like 50 years from now, if there's like a heritage speaker of Raji who wants to access some of this information that you've collected, where would they go? Would it be predominantly to the published books that you have done, or is there some other kind of, where could they hear the language, for example? Where could they, see some of the traditional arts, or even see some of their elders, audio and video of that?
Actually, all the data which I have collected, I have recorded those data, and now we are trying to archive that data. Due to this reason only, initially I made the talking dictionary, because I wanted them to hear those words, the words their elders speak. But due to the availability of technology and the means right now, they don't have those means with them. So actually, I wanted to convert that dictionary into a mobile app also. I contacted few young scholars, like I think I asked you also, Monali, once, and I shared this.
Yes.
So I wanted that to convert it in an app, but before that, I have to provide smartphones to the children. Then only they will be able to use that. So I'm looking for funding also, Shobhana ji, so that I can provide the technology to the community.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to make a note of those things that you've said, archiving and then technology for the providing and creating us like a talking dictionary and phones for the kids. And then the other question I had just quickly is about using traditional art. Like they may not be interested in the language, but if traditional art is something that can lead to some economic betterment, like, they can, then that will then bring that in. And I was wondering is there a way of teaching language through those traditional arts? Like what would be a curriculum for doing that? Like a lesson plan, for example, of, I think there must be a way.
Regarding the tradition.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Regarding the traditional art, actually we conducted that workshop. Our objective was to teach other Raji women their traditional art, to make them economically independent. So they made few pieces, and we bought those few pieces from them, and then we sent them the money, and we are trying to motivate them we distributed all the material, because that material is not easily available in their market, in their nearby market. So we provide during the workshops, we provided that material to the Raji women, and we requested them to make those pieces, and we will buy. But the question remains the same. Actually, the problem is the same. They are so involved and occupied in their day-to-day activity. So right now they are not in a position to make those pieces for us. So one has to be constantly in touch with the community. So now what I'm trying to do, I'm requesting some local NGOs. Actually, I have been trying, but I think one NGO is eager. They are going to support us. I'm constantly trying, and I'm asking them, because I live quite far from the community. So reaching the community all the time, and presently I'm working in the university also. I'm waiting for the day I'm going to retire. But the problem would be that the area is very mountainous and hilly area. So I don't know whether by that time I will be able to climb up. So, but I'm trying my level. But yeah. And other point is also there. Actually, I talked about the wooden bowl making. Last time we tried to conduct a workshop, but no Raji male was interested to teach others. So now we are trying to contact the Nepal Raji people, because they I have come to know through different scholars. We are in contact. I am in touch with them. Many people they residing in Nepal side, they know how to make those bowls. So in the next workshop, we are going to call them, and then I'm planning to teach Raji male how to make those bowls. The sole purpose to make them sustainable. Sorry for that. Today I'm so passionate about my work, and so I get very excited when I talk about them. So sorry for that. So the archiving part we are trying our best, Shobhanaji, and we are making videos also. While conducting the workshops, we have made the videos also. So
perfect.
Yeah.
I made a note to try to find time to talk to you next week. So you may see an email from me so we can discuss further. I think that's just very
sure.
interesting.
Would love to. We can have a one-to-one meeting on Zoom.
Yes, absolutely.
And would love to have suggestions from you, and so that I can further work for the benefit of the society, the community, and for the academic circle also. Because as Monali mentioned, so now I will see, I will try to come. Actually, till now, I was just comparing the data with Raji Raute from Nepal side, Raji Raute. So Jana Fertier is an anthropologist living in US. She has worked with the Raji Raute group from Nepal. So I have collaborated with her, and we have done some comparative study. So now, but I would definitely try to do some comparative study with Northeastern languages also.
Thank you, Shobhana ma'am, for your suggestions, and thank you, Kavita ma'am, for your insightful inputs regarding this. I think Bijen also has some question to ask, so you can also take your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Monali, for the time. Thank you, madam, for your elaborate presentation on the works that you have carrying out on Raji. First thing that I was so fascinated was keeping up two names for the Raji kids. I just want to know why the community give two names to their children. That is the first thing. And the second one is not direct question. Using of the word kaka that is the younger brother of the father. It's also very prominent in Tibeto-Burman speaking group, especially in among the Manipuri. So we have a word for that also, but either the young generation or the people who who are very comfortable using Hindi or English, now it is substituted with that word, particularly kaka. So kaka is very prominent among Manipuri also to address the younger brother of the father. That is another thing. And yeah, those things only, madam. So yeah, so keeping two names, I am very interested why the community keep two names for their kids.
Actually, Bijayan, this is a very common phenomena in other communities. You will also found this phenomena. Actually, initially, while the process of assimilation is going on, initially they keep two names. Their originality there is also there, and that name is mainly used within the community, and the other name is for the other community. So in the schools, the other name they used to the teacher, the peon and the class 4 employees. The other name is for the Kumayuni community, and the native word or their name was for the community people. You will be surprised to know that my uncle used to live in London. Presently, he is no more, and he married a British lady. He kept two names for his daughters, one British name and one Indian name. So Indian name for our family. So when the girls used to visit us, we used to call them and address them with that name. And in London, they were using that name. So this was the reason. And the other question, I just missed the other point.
The second was not a question, madam. That was similarity.
Yeah.
The using of kaka.
Actually, kaka is a very popular term in Avdi also. In Avdi, in Hindi, kaka, we say kaka, we say chacha also. And it is used in Kumayuni also. So they have borrowed this word from there. So instead of dukaiya, now they use kaka. Not kaka, kaka.
Thank you, Bijayan, for the question and for your queries that you have raised. Are there any more questions from the participants? Okay, if there are no more questions, then I think I'd like to thank Kavita ma'am for being a part of this very interactive discussion and enlightening all of us in this talk on linguistic acculturation at K-Study of Raji. I think for many of us here, it's the first time, not for me though, because I have been familiar with the Raji language before, but many of us here might have heard about this language for the first time. So it's totally an eye-opener for all of us regarding how this language is critically endangered and almost going extinct. Thank you, ma'am, once again. Before I request Dr. Bijayan to give vote of thanks, I'd like to request all the participants to show their faces. I mean, don't hide yourselves. We want to take a group photo together. Pranjit, are you there? Can you please help in taking the group the photos? Pranjit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, right. Please show yourselves, show your faces.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. So I'd
Thank
like to
you, everyone.
request, I'd like to request now Dr. Bijan to kindly give vote of thanks on behalf of all of us and also on behalf of Tiblane.
Thank you, Monali, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation and thankful to Professor Shobhana Lakshmi Chelaya and Professor Kavita Rastogi for delivering such an insightful and elaborate presentation on the deduplication as well as on the Razi. We are very thankful for that presentation. And as well, I would like to thank the organizing committee of this international webinar on Indian languages, Professor K.S. Dhiren Singha, Dr. Mary Kim Haukif, Dr. Monali Longmalai, and the head of the department, linguistics, Assam University, Professor Ganesh Bhaskaran sir, and all the scholars who are behind this program. I may not take all the names, so I'm really thankful and appreciated for your kind cooperation for making this program and fruitful and effective one. Thank you all the scholars and students of Assam University Linguistic Department. And I also thank the participants who were participating this program from right from the beginning. Today's the last day. So with your kind support and active participation during the discussion, question and answer hour, that makes a lot to us, especially to the organizing committee, which makes us encouraged to organize such a program in the futures also. I'm really thankful to all the participants for that. And Department of Linguistics, Assam University is going to organize another 2 more webinar, and the flyer, I think that will be rolled out very soon. So, and yeah, I, on behalf of Tiblane, also thank all the people who makes this program an effective and fruitful. So at the last, I would like to thank Professor K.S. Dhiren Singha for his dynamic leadership and for taking up this initiative. So we look forward, you sir, to carry on such types of initiative in the futures also. So I thank everyone, and yeah, that's all. That was the last note. Yeah.
Thank you, Bijan.
Thank you,
Kavita ma'am. Thank you,
all.
Shobhana ma'am, and thank you all.
Yeah. So very good day to Professor Shobhana, and good night to all our Indian friends.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Bye, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Shobhana ji.